Hi, everyone, and thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Admit One podcast, where we interview students who have successfully navigated the college admission process and earned their ticket to college. Today, we are going to be interviewing Aanya, who is a senior from Illinois. She has recently been admitted to Northwestern University, where she'll be a pre-med student majoring in biology and data science as part of the integrated science program. Aanya, thanks so much for joining us and taking the time. Excited to hear a little bit about your journey and learn a little bit more about what got you successfully into Northwestern University.
Of course, I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's start a little bit just talking about your school, your high school. Tell me a little bit about what your curriculum was, because you've had a rigorous curriculum, really, like from the get-go. You, as a freshman, you're taking AP biology, and you've taken really advanced math courses throughout high school, which we'll talk about. But talk to me a little bit about, like, you know, as you got started with high school, what made you feel like you were prepared to take some of those really challenging courses just right off the bat?
My high school, first of all, it's a small all-girls school. So it's a really tight community and we know the administration really well. And one thing that really set me forward, especially in sciences and math, was that I took physics honors, which is a freshman course at my school. I took that over the summer. So that's what led me to take AP Bio as a freshman. And for math, I did Algebra 2 when I was in 8th grade. So I was already ready for pre-calc. And I didn't really have to take a placement test. They looked at my score, like my grades, and I kind of showed that I knew how to do Algebra 2 and all the basic fundamentals. So they put me in pre-calc, and that kind of just set off the trajectory, which is why my STEM classes are like really ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, I talk to a lot of students and families as young as like grade 7 and grade 8, which if you had told me that like 10 years ago that 7th and 8th grade students would be thinking about college admission, I would have been like, that's wild. But now I actually kind of get it, because you know, the courses that you take in grades 7 and 8, obviously they're not going to be like part of the application process. Nobody's looking at your middle school transcript, but they clearly have an impact on what you can take in grade 9, which impacts what you can take in grade 10, 11, and 12, and all of those kinds of things. And so for you, you have a lot of really significant advantages that you continue to ride. And I feel like one of the things that you do really, really well from a transcript standpoint is you start your 9th grade year in honors pre-calculus. You then take AP Calc BC as a sophomore. You then go on and take multivariable calculus outside of your high school, and you're also doing math research as a junior. And then as a senior, you continue to do that, and you take linear algebra. So talk to me a little bit about, like, from a planning standpoint, what was that like? Like, was that did your school promote that for you? Was it something that you had to look for outside of school? Like, what was kind of the structure for you?
Well, as a freshman, I didn't really see myself taking all these courses my like junior and senior year, to be honest. Like, I was just happy that they let me take pre-calc and I wouldn't have to redo a math class that I already did. So I was really happy about that. But then these like opportunities, they kind of came to me. I didn't like go I did like seek them, but I didn't like have to like put in a lot of effort being like, oh no, what math class could I take? Because my school really helped in that. They're like, okay, you finished Calc BC, you did really well in it. There's a chance for you to take multivariable online. And I'm like, of course, like I would love to do that. And the math research honors, like that one wasn't just like a class. It was like a teacher asked a couple of us to that she saw who was like good at math. She asked a couple of us, she's like, do you want to be part of this program? And we did the Modeling the Future Challenge by the Actuarial Foundation. And it was our first year, and we got like national semifinalists, I think, which showed like our teamwork, collaboration, and our understanding of like math and statistics. So I think all these opportunities, like by my previous trajectory, like previous class I had taken, and by opportunity, they just like fell into my lap. And I think that was like a really interesting way, like how it all occurred.
Yeah, it's also like one of the things that I see a lot is students sort of lose the advantages that they have. And you do a great job of not losing the advantages that you have. And so what I mean by that is, like, if you take Calc BC as a sophomore, that's a significant advantage. And sometimes what students will then do is, like, they'll take AP stats, they won't take linear algebra, they won't take multivariable. And so by the time they're applying, yes, they have one extra AP and having taken AP stats, but other students have caught up to them from the standpoint of like they've now taken AP Calc, and so I think to think about how do I go beyond what my curriculum is offering and what my school provides is really important, and you do a great job with that. Was there any conversation at any point from your high school? Because I know a lot of times schools will restrict the number of APs that students can take. Was there any conversation from your high school about like maybe this is too much? I mean, you have A's throughout everything. So, but like, was there ever a time where your high school was like, maybe this is a little bit too much, or maybe you want to back it down or anything like that?
It was actually my freshman year because obviously they didn't know me. Like they just saw like my middle school grades and stuff. But they were like, maybe AP Bio is too much for a freshman because I was like in a class of all seniors. It's technically like a senior class when we take AP Bio. And then they thought it'd be really difficult for me. But then I really like put in a lot of effort. And it did get difficult at times, especially in the beginning of the year, because not only like was I a freshman in AP Bio, it was also like COVID, and it was also like socially I didn't know anyone at my high school because it's like kind of far. So it was like a lot going on, but then I really think that they knew that I could do it, and they like in my school like supported me through that too, where I was like pretty successful in AP Bio as a freshman. And then ever since I think they saw that, there have been no restrictions as like a sophomore or a junior or a senior. Like I'd say the only restrictions are if it doesn't work with my schedule because some classes just happen at the same time.
So have you wanted other classes that you couldn't get because of your schedule?
Yes, I wanted to do anatomy and physiology, but it just like didn't work because I had to take A push as a senior. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason I took it as a senior was because I took AP physics as a junior, and AP physics was the same time as A push. So instead I took AP Euro. So it's kind of jumbled up. Like I didn't really have many classes with like people in my grade, but I think that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, you end up with like I mean, a very robust curriculum, really significant, and so that's great. Okay, cool. And then let's talk a little bit about some of the things outside of the classroom that you're involved with. One of the things that's kind of all over your activity list, and that you alluded to a little bit early, is different research opportunities. So, talk to me a little bit about how those opportunities came about. What were some of the project areas and focal points, and how did you pursue that?
Yeah, so I think my research story starts in middle school. I did water quality and science Olympiad, and I like met my mentor, and he's like a huge like water person. He goes out to all these lakes, detention ponds, everything, and then he just kind of like helps balance the ecosystem. So since before my freshman year, I've been out in the field with him. Like I've been walking through lakes, like scraping zebra mussels off of rocks and everything. So I've had both like in-field research, and also I've been like in the lab like trying to like test the water, see what like cations are present, things like that, just to help understand like the actual in-lab research. And then I write a paper about it. So that was like my first research thing.
And how did
Um,
you just to pause you there? Like, how did you get started with that and meeting this person who's
um,
your mentor and all that?
I think, well, how I got started, like he was first my mentor for water quality, and I think I really understood what was going on because I'm a huge environment fan. Like I always like my invention is like part of the environment, but then I think we really just clicked with each other, and I think he knew that I understand how to like do research. I kind of had that mindset on how to do research. Like I understand a question, like even if there's like a null hypothesis, I understand how to do procedures, how to keep like lab safety while also trying to get as much done. I kind of understood how to do it both in the field and in the lab, and I think that's what he really liked about me. And I also liked the opportunities I got. I liked getting his like guidance, his mentorship. Like we're really close, so I think that's how I was able to like really become a part of that
Mm-hmm.
research. And yeah, that's how I become a part of that.
And one thing I want to touch on too is that sometimes people have an idea of like research needs to be immediately like I got to get in the lab and start working directly with somebody. So
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the experience that you have. So maybe talk a little bit about what, because I think maybe people just like naive about or aren't sure about what research really entails, and so maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of that launching point of um, what research meant to you initially.
Yeah, so this research that I just described is more of like a problem solving type thing. Like someone hires him, we go, we like kind of take samples to see what the actual issue is, and then we like take out like a treatment on it, and we have to take like certain controls so we know like in the future what works, what doesn't. And I'd say like my like true like stereotypical research that happened before my junior year. I did the research in biological sciences at University of Chicago the summer before my junior year, and there I researched basically the effects of like certain cancer killing drugs on the inhibition of telomerase, which is like a certain part in like mice leukemia cells and all cells really, but like we did mice leukemia cells, and that was like basically cancer research. We just wanted to see. I could delve so much into this, but that was my first in lab research where I had like little tiny samples and I was like under the fume hood trying to do this all like super sterile and everything. And I wrote a paper on that. So that was like my first in lab research because it was different than like actually problem solving. It's more about understanding like the actual foundations and the fundamentals behind the topic that I was doing. And also I added upon that research the summer before my senior year, but this is another type of research that people don't think about. It's not like in the lab. I just wrote a research paper, a review paper about just the basics of telomeres because I love telomeres. I've worked with them, but a lot of people don't know what they are. Either when they search it up, they get that one sentence thing in AP Bio, like, oh, they're the caps of chromosomes, stuff like that. But otherwise, they get like a huge like papers that people like normal people just won't understand.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I
my
don't know what it is. So
my goal is to write a review paper that like any lay person could like understand what they do, what the components are, like basically the structure and functions of telomeres and telomerase, and so they could just learn more about that because that was like my passion and I wanted to share it with others.
that's awesome. So we're gonna get back into research and all of those kinds of things in just a minute. But I want to start just by thinking a little bit about as you begin developing your school list and thinking about where you want to apply. What are some of the things that you're looking for and looking at, and how does your list sort of come together from a strategic standpoint?
I would say the most important to me on the list, like other than academics, of course, was just opportunities. And like that might not be a common answer, but after going to my high school and seeing how certain opportunities just came to me, like I didn't have to go seeking them, they just came to me. I wanted some place that I could also make use of such opportunities. And I also have like the resources present for what I needed. And also I wanted somewhere like really collaborative because I feel like I'm like a social individual. Like if I want to work on something, I'd like to do it with others, kind of like share bounce ideas off of each other. Because I feel like that's like the best way to learn. I feel like is through my classmates and like peers. So I wanted somewhere really collaborative too. So opportunities, resources, collaboration, and also I feel like high like priority on research because I feel like one way to like truly understand what you're learning or even like what you're teaching is like actually like doing research with it because then you're the one thinking of the question and like maybe the procedure, like you're the one shaping everything around it. So I think that's like such an important part of actually learning something instead of just like memorizing.
Yeah, that's great. And so you land on Northwestern, obviously, and you end up applying early decision to Northwestern. Talk to me a little bit about like, was there any hesitancy to do that? Because sometimes kids, especially like right around now, when kids are starting to think about or when this will get released, students are really thinking about what is my school list, what like makes the most sense for me. Do I want to tie myself down to a college and apply early decision? There are certainly a lot of competitive advantages, and colleges are taking like half of their class during early decision. But did you have any hesitancy? Was it like certainly your number one choice? Like what's kind of the thought process for you?
Well, the only time I was hesitant was before I even visited Northwestern because I'm like, oh, it's too close to home. But like, I did visit and I loved it so much. And I'd say I ED'd because obviously it's a higher acceptance rate and I really wanted to make use of that. And I think I was able to ED because I knew what I wanted from my college experience. So then I was like, okay, so this happens at Northwestern. I can do this. Here are some pros. There's also like some cons, as every place has. But then I like, okay, I feel like this is the place for me. I feel comfortable when I visit. It just has everything that I think I could work with. So that's how I was confident to ED. I feel like if I wasn't confident to ED or if I had some hesitancy, then I would like not appreciate it in either way, even if I got in or even if I didn't. Because if I got in, then I could have been like, oh darn, maybe I should have gone there. And if
Hmm.
I didn't get in, then it's like, oh, I just wasted an ED.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
feel like to ED, like it's to have that 100%. Like I'd be so happy if I got in and so excited for this.
Yeah, and Northwestern's also one of those places too where like, if you got into Northwestern and you didn't get to hear back from other places, like I don't really feel that bad for you. You're going to one of the one of the best schools in the
Yeah.
world. Like, I think you're going to be okay. Um, so let's kind of transition and talk a little bit more about some of the materials that you submit for your application. So we'll start with what your Common App essay is, and I'll bring it up so that people can see it who are watching. But talk to me a little bit about your approach as you start to as you know think about your Common App and what you're trying to convey and all of those kinds of things. Like, what is it that that you're looking at, and how is it that that you land on this particular topic, and what's sort of the approach that you're taking?
I would say basically, first off, stay organized. Like college process is so messy. There's so many different like facets that like happen. So just like stay organized. And I'd say for the Common App specifically, don't wait a couple of months. Don't write something for a couple of months and be like, this is the perfect topic. Because chances are that you write that and then later you're like, maybe not. So what I personally did, I had like 5 or 6 drafts. And when I mean drafts, not like iterations of this essay, but like 5 or 6 totally different topics that I just like cranked out in like a couple of hours just for the idea or just for like the message that I wanted to show. And from that, I like discussed. I looked through it. I asked people I knew who knew me, and I'm like, okay, like which one do you think shows me the most? So then over time, over a couple iterations, I landed on this essay, and I feel like my college essay it was a bit. It was also serious, like it had that gravitas, but it was also a little bit playful in the sense that it kind of showed what I like, and I love driving. It also showed different things. Like it talked about me doing basketball, which I really like, and it touched on in other parts of my application. I talked about like me being from India, which is like a big part of like my cultural identity. And I think I did touch upon that in my application. And also I talked about like me like going through a struggle, which I first thought was like, how do I get through this? And like I didn't even recognize it was a struggle, but then how I realized that I had that problem solving attitude and like how to fix it and how to become better. So I think my college essay wasn't just like one thing, but it touched on a couple other things. Like it was a story within a story.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that one of the things that's really great about this essay is, you know, we tend to like people the more we get to know them, and so and it's really hard in a college application. Like, you know, I've reviewed 20,000 college applications in my life, and I'm probably spending like 8 to 12 minutes on an application as a whole. And so it's hard to feel like you really get to know somebody within this. And I think there's this tendency to want to get, from students to want to put like everything that they've ever done through high school within the context of this like 650 word essay, or even within the context of the application and supplementals and those kinds of things. And I talk a lot about like trying to focus on elite components of your profile, but I also think that it's really important to be likable and vulnerable and honest and sincere, and your essay comes across very much so within from related to those like characteristics and attributes.
Thank
And
you.
I think that you have so many other things in your profile that are elite. Like, you know, you read your transcript and it's like, okay, you've taken a million AP courses in advanced classes. And then, you know, it talks in your activity list a lot about like all of the research experiences that you do. And we'll get into how you also talk about those in other areas. And then, you know, you've started different organizations. And so all of these things come across as like elite. And so then from a Common App essay to have more personality, more vulnerability within it, I think is really important, and adds sort of like a it makes you, it humanizes you a little bit, which I think is really important. The other thing that you do really well within this is you use the space really effectively. So for example, you have at the beginning here, you're going to have this opening paragraph, which is kind of your hook, right? And so you're using 127 words to describe what your hook is, and kind of paint the picture. Then you get into sort of context and the idea of like, you know, feeling senses of anxiety, and what is that like, the kind of challenges that that stress and anxiety kind of how they affect you, and all of those kinds of things. And there you're going to use 166 words, right? There's a tendency for a lot of students to have the bulk of their essay be about the context and be about the challenge, as opposed to what you did and how you thought critically and how you overcame some of those things and what you're consistent, still doing to overcome those things. So I'm not looking for like finality of it. But then you get into the whole rest of the essay, is more than half of the essay is talking about what you learned, how you persevered, how you overcame these things, what are the tools that you utilize, and you're really specific in what you do, and how things evolve, and how you're kind of developing, your understanding of your sense of self, and all of those kinds of things. And so, for me, I think that the usage of how you use the words and how you structure everything is also really fantastic and really well done. Was that something that you struggled with at all? I wonder, because I know a lot of times kids have like so much context and background, and there's not a tremendous amount of like persistence and how you overcame those things.
Right. I'd say I did struggle with that. Like, I feel like it's a very common problem because, like, how do you talk about like what you learned if people don't know the context of it?
Yeah.
So what I did, I kind of just like free wrote. Like, this essay is supposed to be 650 words. I had like doubled that pretty much, and I just wrote the entire story, just like everything from the heart. I wrote the entire story, and then I like shared it with a couple people. I'm like, okay, like, what do you think? Could still tell my story, because obviously everything's important to you since you're the one writing it. But like, what do you think can tell my story, but I could still remove? So I was very like particular about like what I was saying, because obviously like college admissions officers, they don't want to like just read the background and then have like one sentence on, oh, how you fixed it. They want to see your thought process on how you fixed it, what you did, like what realization did you have. So I'd say like that's why I kept that the longest part. Like I really broke it down into like, I would say like baby steps so people understand exactly my thought process. Oh, like this is the issue. I understand the issue. What should I do? Like I kind of struggled to find the solution. I found the solution. How the solution helped me. I broke this down into different sentences. And one thing that I felt like brought some like sophistication, as like the AP exam readers that like say the sophistication point, I would say it was the fact that I had that story within a story. If you look at my first and last paragraphs, they're like bookends, and I feel like that those bookends really brought the story together because it showed the so what, like why was this important, this realization important. And if you read my essay, it's about me like being really anxious like my sophomore year. So then if I just said like, oh yes, my anxiety, like it really hurt me sophomore year as like my entire essay, then it's like, okay, I see that, I see you fixed it, but like why was it so important? Like how did this entail in your day-to-day life? But the fact that I had that other story around it, like me driving in India and like the rough traffic, it shows like this is like a universal problem like in her life, but now she found the solution and she shows it every single day. So I think that's the so what factor that makes the essay memorable, because it shows that like I found a solution and I'm using it every day, and it's not just the issue and the solution, it's like a whole story around it.
Yep, I love it. I think that's you hit the nail on the head with that. And I would recommend students when they're writing their essays to look at it just the way that we just did. How many words am I using on my hook? If it's more than like 130, 140 words, it probably doesn't. It can probably be reduced, and you can add more details and specifics in other areas. And then look at how much background am I talking about? Am I talking about things that I'm doing in fourth grade? Am I emphasizing things that have happened in elementary school? Or am I really painting the picture of like, here's the context for what the challenge was. And so I'm spending, 150 words on that. And then that still gives you more than half of your essay to talk about how that shaped you, what your perspective is, how that evolved, what changes you implemented, all of those kinds of things. So like literally looking at the word count, I think is can be really helpful, because you look at it, you're like, oh geez, I'm spending 40% of my essay talking about like opening the hook or talking about something I did before high school and that sort of thing. I would recommend thinking a little bit about that. Now I want to get back into some of the other things that you present to Northwestern, because you have some other really strong essays for their supplementals, and they're one of the schools that have multiple supplemental essays. So some schools will have your main essay, and then they might have like the why do you want to go here essay, but Northwestern has several supplementals. And so let's go through some of those as well, and talk a little bit about what those essays look like. Let me just pull that up. Bear with me a second.
Right. The Northwestern essays were like different this year. I think this was their first year using the 6 or 7 essay choices they gave where we have to choose
Yeah.
a couple. So it was like really hard trying to even decipher what they have because like if you just search up a supplemental question for a college, then there's like always that website that's like, oh, you want to talk about this, like this is what the question is asking. But Northwestern's was new, so it was like a whole other challenge this year trying to do that.
Exactly. So let's start with uh, this first one, which is essentially, what aspects of your background. There's a lot of times when people will talk about like background, identity, culture, what kind of shaped you. They're really looking at like what is maybe the most significant part of your identity experience, and then how does that affect or how will it be implemented within Northeasterns? And you talk about sort of the creation of this organization that you have in high school. And so maybe you can give a little bit of context as far as like what the creation of that organization is, and then we can kind of talk about some of the key points of this essay.
Sure. So I did scholastic ball in middle school and I was actually like pretty good, but like my team was very competitive and it's like hard not to be competitive when like he's my friend, like but like he's like the national like winner, like the individually number one in the nation for scholastic ball. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to like kind of have that confidence to be like, oh, I'm good if like your team is just surrounded by like amazing people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a very competitive team just because it was like middle school. And then I went to like an all girls school and I was like, I like scholastic ball, but that's okay. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. It was so competitive. Like, it was like not that great of an experience. But then the thing is, like, I love trivia so much. Like, I love these questions. I love doing them. So I'm like, I want to start this club. But then it's like at Scholastic Bowl, there's like barely any women. And like I said, I go to an all girls school. But then by the time I like kind of gained some confidence in myself, I'm like, I'm starting this team. And I was like, I was prepared to have like only like 2, 3 other people who were interested. But then it's the biggest club at my school. Like more than half the people at my school are like a part of Scholastic Bowl.
Hmm.
So that was like really insane because like we all just
Yeah.
loved it. And like our community is like amazing in that sense. Like we're really tight knit. And then I realized that since I'm the only one who's like actually been a part of Scholastic Bowl in middle school and I understand the tournaments, the matches, like how it happens, certain techniques, I was like, okay, I have to kind of take like I was captain and obviously I was the founder, but then I was like, I kind of have to take a step because I'm not going to be here forever. Like this team's going to still continue without me. So I made it a point to like see other people, even people that like I would be like statistically better than, and like give them confidence because that's not something that like happened to me when I was in middle school. So I wanted like my team to like have that like camaraderie and like understand that we are each a team and we each bring different things to the table and to have that like um confidence in ourselves because I feel like even a club like this that shows your knowledge like that gives a lot of confidence. So then I feel like this was a big part of like my personal identity because I also grew in the sense that I didn't have any confidence and then I did, but not just that, but I understood how to give like other people like the opportunities or like help raise their confidence in certain topics or if they make a mistake like hey it's okay like we'll just get them next time and I feel like that really shaped me as a person and also I'm like we like shattered gender stereotypes and like we were just such a positive force in the scholastic bowl community like at tournaments everyone would know us like other
Hmm.
coaches and moderators they'd be like oh like you were so like sweet you guys are so funny like you guys bring such positive energy to scholastic bowl and like we were at small school nationals in our first year and this like random team from like I think it was like Alabama or Arkansas they're like oh that's Woodlands and they were like waving
That's
at
cool.
us
Yeah.
and I was like hi but like we don't know you like what school do you guys go to like it was just insane that like we were able to create such a positive force and I feel like having that confidence to like do that in the community I feel like that's something I gained and I wanted to bring to Northwestern like have that like that I felt like that was like my biggest strong point.
Yeah, and from an essay standpoint, you do a couple of things really well. So I'm gonna read out one section here, where you say, having discerned the power of collaboration and encouragement or lack thereof, I carefully shape team dynamics, drawing on my experience to focus on healthy competition and team spirit. To foster community, I scheduled weekly meetings during lunch where the team ate and practiced together. Sorry, my glasses. Now I got to read. Um, Instead of criticizing members for mistakes, I cultivated an empathetic growth mindset. So I think to me, like this is something that I think you do a really good job with. With a lot of times kids will make claims without supporting evidence. And for you you make the claims, but then you provide evidence of like what exactly you did to create this environment. What are the specific elements that you're doing? And so I think that's a really important thing for kids to think about as they start writing their supplemental essays and even main essays. Is like, be careful that we're not making claims without that supporting evidence. And then you also talk about, you mention that you then you win the small school now, or you get to small school nationals in your first year, which is an amazing accomplishment. But it's also it's mentioned in the essay. It's not like the essay is not a paragraph form resume where you're just talking about all of the accolades that you have. That's listed in your activity list. We don't need to reiterate it, but you do a good job of like sprinkling that little piece of like, and we were really successful, but not making that the focal point. So I think that's really great and important as well.
Thank you.
And then so the next question is, and I love these kinds of questions that of like they're essentially think of a class. What's a course that you would make up, and then tell me what the class is. And so your course is sticky wizardry. So talk to me a little bit about like how did you come up with this? And this is, I think, a good way of like, when I talk to kids sometimes about like, sometimes you want to take a little bit of a chance, like think about how you want to present things and try to be like entertaining, not like you're not a comedian, but like, think about from the reader's perspective, what's something that they're going to get out of this, that they're going to say, oh, wow, that's something unique and interesting. And I haven't seen this before. So talk to me about your thought process there.
Yes. So, as you saw in my other essay, it was a bit more serious, but I was like, I already had in my mind, so I wanted this essay to be like just a little bit more playful because like it kind of like sounds like how I actually like talk. I'm just like kind of like very lighthearted. So I wanted that my actual tone to like go through this essay. And honestly, it took me a really long time to like think of an idea. Like I just couldn't think of one. But two things actually happened that led me to choose this essay. I was actually in my chem textbook and they had this like one page, like you know how they have the little real life stories? It was like
Mm-hmm.
about the creation of sticky notes and like the molecules they use for the adhesive. And I was like, wait, that's like really interesting. And then where I also study, there's a window in front. It's covered in sticky notes, like just post-it notes all over the place, different colors. Like it looks like chaos, but it makes sense to me because I'm a big post-its person. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is an amazing idea. So not only had I known like how like effective post-its are like to like the mind, like to like help organize thoughts, but also the scientific, like the creation behind it. I thought that was really interesting. So that's how I thought of sticky wizardry. And like if you kind of read through it, you can kind of see little puns hidden there, not too obvious, but like little bit puns. And in fact, like my first essay, I thought it was like too creative, so I had to kind of tone it down a little bit because I still do want an essay. But yeah, I like thought overall like how post-it notes like tie in different like different disciplines of like work and like how that could happen. And I think this is like an idea I think no one's probably thought of.
Yeah, I think it's great. And then you end with the if they just stick to it
Yeah,
kind of
that
pun at
was
the
that was
end.
so clever.
So I like that. I like that a lot. I think sometimes kids will have like, probably to maybe the way that you were thinking earlier, they'll have like little puns and jokes in there, and then it starts to feel like the entire thing is like trying to be comedic instead of just having like maybe one or two. And then if the reader doesn't get it or doesn't see it, like it is what it is, but you don't want to overdo it. And I think
Right.
this does a really good job of talking about what an actual course might look like and why there's value to it. And the kind of intersection of psychology, management, and design thinking, and how does that create innovation and all of those kinds of things. But then you also have like sort of the entertaining or interesting
Right.
pieces of it as well. So I thought this was a great answer. And then going back to like when you look at it from the context of the entire application, right? So we talked earlier about like really strong transcript. You have sort of the vulnerability piece within your main essay. Then you have the really successful creation of the organization at your school and what that meant. And now you have this kind of like clever piece that you talk about. And then the final piece is talking about community and what you're going to bring to Northwestern. So this one you do a great job of. This is kind of like your why Northwestern type of essay, and this thing is like riddled with specific parts of Northwestern, specific parts of their program, the community, like how you're involved in different things. And then what you do a great job is you connect those things to the things that you have done.
Yeah.
Sometimes in these, kids have a tendency to sound like they've gone online for 25 minutes. They found a bunch of programs, they just list it off, and it sounds like they, are just listing things that they found on the internet. You do a great job of relating the things that you have done to what the institution offers. And so talk a little bit about sort of your thought process on this one too.
Yeah, I feel like for this one, I really wanted it to tie to other parts of my application. Like, I don't know if you like realize this one is really subtle, but in my sticky wizardry one, I talk about innovation, and that ties to my additional informations where I have like a patent on an invention. So I think that kind of shows who I am. So like, if they were careful and like even subconsciously, you kind of make that tie. Here specifically, I talked about things that like I actually had proof in my real life that I did enjoy because like for example like I'm very interested in poetry but like it's nowhere else in like my application like, that's just like a personal thing for me so it'd be kind of like awkward if I wanted to join like the poetry club for example so then it's like where did this come from but
Mm-hmm.
like for everything I had here like for example tight knit community I come from like a small all girls school I mentioned how good like the community is and then that's why I want to be part of a residential college leadership like I talk about like I'm student body president and like I do certain events I like talk to like the administration on behalf of the students that sort of thing so I talk about that here part of slipka's like executive board I talk about quiz bowl like how like I want to join the quiz bowl team because like actually I did mention this somewhere like my first quiz bowl tournament was the Northwestern middle school wildcat tournament so it's like a full circle moment that like connects to
Yeah.
this and also, I talk about like inventor and F1 enthusiast. And if you look back at my Common App essay, it's about driving. Like that's one of my interests. And I think that kind of shines through. And inventor, back to like I talk about my invention here, and I think that kind of like ties into like my leadership, my innovative likeness, my interest of like quiz bowl and like driving, like things like a tight knit community as well. So then like those are like the couple like topics that I touched on that kind of touch to other parts of my application that kind of provides the basis for like oh she actually like will do this because like let's say I don't even do any of this they're like I still like they feel like I would probably do that. But
Mm-hmm.
if I just talk about like certain clubs that I had like no like ties to, then it'd be like, okay, but is she actually going to be like a part of this? So I
Right.
feel like it's like understanding, like giving that confidence that I will be a part of this because this is what I've done and this is what I plan to do. And then at the end, I just talked about Northwestern, and once again, like not a pun, but I did like incorporate like their motto into it just to show that like I do kind of know what I'm talking about in that sense.
Yeah. I think from a whole presentation standpoint, like you do a great job in this of sort of demonstrating the different elements of you as an individual, the accomplishments and successes that you've had, um, being likable and presenting in that way, but then also having things that are elite comparatively to your peers, which is exactly what you're trying to do in these things. So I think that's why you were successful. It makes a lot of sense. I also want to touch a little bit on, you had talked about your additional information section, and I want to start by saying uh, you do not. Most kids do not need to utilize the additional information section in the ways that they typically do. I will have students who will say, okay, I need to write my additional information section essay. Do not write an essay for your additional information section. That is not what you want to be doing. Instead, if you really want to think about if there are sort of bullet points and key elements that I don't feel like I've been able to focus on throughout the application, then I want to be able to include these things. You should think about the admission officer spending like 60 seconds looking at the additional information section. If I read an application and I get to the additional information section and it's a narrative, I'm like, oh my God, I got to read this whole thing. It's a negative. So look at it from the standpoint of who the reader is. And you do a very good job. And I don't see great additional information sections very often, but I think that this is a really, really good version of it. And so I want to just pull this up so that that you can kind of read through this. So talk to me a little bit about what sort of your thought process was here.
Well, there were so many things that I did that I actually didn't realize I couldn't put on like the actual application,
Mm-hmm.
and things that were like really special to me, kind of because I put in so much effort and time, and I like sought out these opportunities, and like there are some things that kind of make me me, and I felt like there's so many things that I just couldn't lose. So I'm like, okay, like I have to like add stuff to the additional information section. So there's like some scores I talked about, like some background, like AP Environmental. I self studied that and I got a 5, which I think is like pretty impressive. So I wanted to put that to show like not only did I like self study and I did this on my own and got a 5, but I'm also interested in the environment. I talked about different research I had done and I gave like links to show like this is like what happened. This is the effects of it. I talked about my patent. I attached like my patent, the code and everything. Then I kind of just went more into depth because I did have like my U Chicago ribs program mentioned, but I went more into depth because obviously you only have like some time, like some certain amount of characters to write it. So I talked about like what I did and how I furthered my research because it's one thing to just do research and be like, oh yeah, yeah, I published a paper, but it's one thing to actually like I feel like have that interest and I try to gain on top of that. So then I talked about my like, UCI program where I basically did a review paper about telomerase and telomeres where I like um, furthered my research on that. And I talked about other like research projects I had done. And I also did other extracurriculars, which I thought was very important to me. Like the first thing that went there was my junior ring ceremony. And I was chosen to be speaker. And honestly, I was terrified of public speaking. Like I would be shaking. This is the one time where like I gave a speech. I felt so confident in the message I had to say. And like I got a standing ovation. It was like really great. So then I like explained the background to that and I gave like a YouTube link to like my speech. I did certain like physician shadowing, so I like know that I want to be on the pre med track and like certain things that I'd experienced and seen and like how I helped, just to show that I wasn't just like a fly on the wall, but I kind of was like a part of that community. Um, some things that I also did was like volunteering because I felt like there are certain things like certain um like topics in volunteering. Like for example, I did a lot in like education and like health and like also literacy. I did like those are like my main topics in volunteering that I like wanted to show that I touched upon.
Yeah, and one of the things I would say is like, I wouldn't expect uh and I totally understand, putting the links in there. I think it is important, and there's value to it. I wouldn't expect like the admission officer to be like clicking every link, right?
Yeah.
And so like, as for students that are out there thinking about like, what do I want to include? Don't anticipate if you wrote a research paper, the admission officer is not going to read your research paper. But I think in this the way that you do it, it's more of just like you're highlighting some things that happen for you, and then you're saying like, here's where it is. Like this is where it's hosted or where you could see more about it. And I think there are times where somebody might say, oh, I would like to see like this speech, the ring ceremony speech, or I might want to see the patent or whatever. Not that I'm assessing the patent or or the technology or science behind it or anything like that, but more just out of curiosity. And so I think that the way you structure it as sort of bullet points and key elements is a really good way for a reader to look at it and say like, okay, I get what these pieces are, and if there's interest in sort of seeing a little bit more detail about it, then it's easily accessible, which I think is great.
Right.
um, Cool. Well, this has been very, very helpful. I like to end just by getting a little bit of a sense from you now that you've gone through this process. You're wrapping up your senior year. You're ready to go to college. When you think back on yourself, maybe like a year ago, and sort of the thought process that you had as you begun the the application process and conceptualizing your essays and all of that, is there like a piece of advice or maybe something that you did that you would change, or anything that you would look back and say like, I wish I had known this a year ago?
I would say stay organized. Like it's such like a messy process because you're not only applying to one school, like you're applying to a bunch. And like I know there's like the Common App would send it to all schools, but it's like it's very complex and it can be like different at times. So like my main piece of advice is like literally get a paper calendar, get different colored Sharpies, and just do everything ahead. Like do like, oh, I'm gonna do these 4 schools. I want to finish them by this weekend. The next 4 schools like this weekend. Because I'm just gonna be honest, you're not gonna finish them in that weekend. But it's
No.
good to have that goal like ahead of time, because it's not just like, oh, I finished it, it's good to go. It's maybe like, oh, my counselor has to send like a teacher rec, or like my transcript, or I have to get this in. Like there's so many things that you don't control. That's like, you don't want to be figuring that out at the last minute. It's like, if like early decision is due like November 1st, genuinely like in your head, it'd be like, I'm gonna finish this end of September.
Hmm.
Because technically you can do these applications in like a day, but obviously it wouldn't be a good one. Like the thing that makes an application shine is the iterations and the thought behind it that you put in. It's like, oh, this ties to everything else. It's like the subtlety of like sophistication that like you know about, that like ties in genuinely to like everything else, and shows that you put in time and effort to show you as a whole human being, that isn't just like listing stuff off, but connecting different extracurriculars, honors, activities, classes, etc.
100%. I always say, like, we'll create a timeline, and then when a student inevitably does not hit that timeline, we'll create a new timeline, and like we'll keep the thing moving, but we got to at least be making some progress.
Yeah.
And when you have time, if it's early in the summer and you've got time before November 1st, like, try to start chipping away, get some of these things completed, get content. The biggest thing really from my perspective is like, get as much content that you want to include in your application on paper as soon as possible. And then you can frame it however you want. In the Northwestern application is going to be very different from the U Chicago application, which is very different from the Duke application, which is different from the UCs, right? So like, getting content that you want to utilize is, I think, the most important thing. And then you can work on creatively and effectively framing it as best as possible when the time comes.
Right.
Awesome. Well, Anya, thanks so much for taking the time. This has been super, super helpful. And I know that kids are going to learn a lot from it. And we're really excited to see what the future holds for you at Northwestern. And hopefully we'll get to check in and learn what the first semester looked like for you. So thanks again so much for coming. And thanks everybody for listening to another episode.
Of course. Thank you.